I will now begin. So welcome everyone to JNF Australia's webinar with psychotherapist Ayelet Shmuel. My name is Nikki Lieb. I'm the JNF WA Donor Relations Manager. Before we introduce Ayelet, I'd like to provide an update on JNF Australia's emergency fund that was set up over 6 weeks ago following the horrific 7th of October attacks on Israel. So far, the fund has helped Sderot and all the Gaza border regional councils, as well as other southern communities further away from the border that have taken in thousands of evacuees. We have just entered a new phase of supporting the immediate needs of the affected communities, and the response from our Australian community has been incredible. We can't thank you enough for your support. If you'd like to donate to JNF's emergency fund, there is a link in the chat. Today, we welcome Ayelet Shmuel, an Israeli-American who was born and raised in Ashkelon, was an officer in the IDF, and attained her BA at Tel Aviv University. Ayelet then moved to Denver, Colorado, where she started a family, had her professional training, and became an American citizen. After 18 years in the US, she returned to Israel, to her hometown of Ashkelon, where she now lives with her teenage son. These days, Ayelet trains professional and paraprofessional teams in Sderot in the field of psychological first aid. She is a psychotherapist working with clients dealing with war trauma in Sderot and Ashkelon, and is the director of the International Resilience Center of Sderot. In 2020, JNF Australia's annual campaign was in support of the development of the Sderot Resilience Center, which provides animal-assisted trauma therapy for children and families living in Sderot. We were privileged at the time to have Ayelet on a panel of speakers via Zoom to give us much needed advice on how to keep ourselves and our children resilient while we dealt with the invisible enemy called COVID. Today, 3 years later, Ayelet joins us as we fight two dangerous and threatening enemies to Israel and the Jewish world's existence, Hamas and anti-Semitism. Ayelet, welcome back to our JNF Australia's audience of supporters. We know how busy you are on the ground in Sderot and are so flying around the world in your additional role as international spokesperson for Sderot. We really appreciate you giving us your time today. We feel so privileged to hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's really great to have you here. Thank you. So I guess I'll start with a few questions, and then we also have questions from the audience. So we'll just let it flow from the questions. And I'll start with the first one. You live in Ashkelon, the city in Israel with the most daily missile attacks. How are you and your son doing?
Well, I guess it really depends on what time of the day you catch us, right? So right now, it's fairly quiet. We live really close to Gaza, so we can hear all the helicopters, all the planes, and all the bombings that are happening in Gaza. I mean, we can hear everything from here. October 7th, 8th, 9th, and I think the first week were horrifying. Okay, we had terrorists that actually got into Ashkelon. They didn't get to kill anybody here, to murder anybody here, but we had gunfights, not far away from my home. The streets right now feel safer, I have to say. We do have sirens, and hopefully I don't have one in the middle of our meeting, but we do have sirens still, and we do have rockets still. The city was, it was half empty at one point. You need to understand, in Ashkelon, we have 170,000 people, 40,000 of them without a bomb shelter. So a lot of people were either evacuated or made sure that they leave town. And I'm one of the lucky ones, I guess, that I have a bomb shelter, but it didn't feel safe at the beginning. I mean, I had to get out of my house because my bomb shelter is outside. We would go outside with a knife because we weren't sure if there's a terrorist waiting for us in the backyard, So the first week, 2 weeks did not feel safe or secure, but now we're fine. We're doing okay. So, and my son, I think what we do is that we keep busy. We keep active. And I think that helps a lot.
Well, you're very active. Every day you drive to Sderot and you help treat those affected by the terror attacks of 7th of October and beyond. What does your role look like these days since 7th of October?
So since the International Center was open, my role is more on an international level. So right now during a crisis, what happens in the city of Sderot, everybody has a different role. I mean, you have your routine role and you have your crisis role, right? During emergency. So during emergency, I do a lot of international media and anything that has to do with philanthropy, but also we're doing trainings on a national level. So one of the things that we've realized, because the trauma is so severe, and it's so broad, and it's a national trauma. We needed all hands on deck, and we did not have enough therapists. So we were doing a lot of online classes and online trainings for therapists in order to be able to have enough hands, to treat people. So that's one. And the Resilience Center in Sderot is on the ground working with people that have been, impacted by this event. So we have, I don't know if people know, but in Sderot there are 36,000 residents, and right now we have 8,000 people in Sderot. The rest of them are spread out throughout the country. We have 5 main centers: one in Eilat, Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, the Dead Sea, and Netanya. And in those centers, really, we have like small municipalities in each center, and we give them all the services that they need. So there's like a sub-mayor in every center, and this is where they get all the services, from education to mental health to everything else that you can think of. But it's very difficult to run a city like that, and the mayor has been kind of running around through the centers and coming to Sderot to also deal with, government and government offices and everything that it entails. So it's been challenging to do that.
Well, so how do the families receive the trauma therapy? Are the therapists going there to them? And so how does that work?
So we had it in 2 stages. You have to understand, we've never had it before. So usually we're used to having rockets. And when we have rockets, then the Resilience Center on the ground opens up, and then people either call on a hotline or ask for help. And if there's a direct hit on a house, then there's an intervention team that comes out, and sometimes it's mental health professionals that go as well. This time, it was not safe. It was not safe to even open the center itself. No one was on the streets because the streets were dangerous. We had gunfights and fights with these terrorists all over town. So no one was able to leave the house. After a day and a half, they were able to bring in some people from the Resilience Center into the command post in the city hall. And only then we did a lot of phone interventions. There were not a lot of face-to-face interventions at that time because we didn't want to risk anybody. When people got evacuated and started being evacuated, the mental health professionals go to the hotels. So they set up spaces for them in each center, and people of Sderot know where to go. The thing is, at the beginning, it was more of an intervention, like a mental health intervention, and now we're kind of moving towards some kind of a therapy. You need to understand, if you're from the field, to do any kind of work, any kind of trauma work, you need the conditions to be there, the setting to be there. You need things to be safe and secure. Well, it's not happening yet. People that were evacuated to Eilat have rockets on their heads from Yemen, right? The people that have been evacuated to Tel Aviv still have sirens. The people in Jerusalem had sirens and a terror attack over there. I mean, it doesn't end. So when you do this kind of work, and when you do mental health intervention and therapy, you really want to be mindful of the timeline, and if the setting is right, dive into trauma work, because sometimes it's not. You have to be very careful and know what you're doing. So I hope that helps.
Yes, that is. That does help. And well, can you give us some examples of the most practical therapy tools that you're using?
So what we're doing, we're switching from mental health intervention, which is very practical way to get somebody to reduce their acute stress reactions, okay, their symptoms, and to get them to be more active. And we're kind of sitting in between that and trauma-focused psychotherapy, which talks about, okay, we know where your trauma sits. How are we going to get you to be connected to your resources, to your strengths, to the things that work better for you, and to get you, again, moving towards gaining control over your life and over your psyche in order for you to be able to come out the other side. The goal is one. We're trying to minimize the amount of people that are going to develop post-traumatic stress disorder. We're trying to step away from that. The sooner we intervene, the better the results are going to be. Those are that's the research behind it, and we know that. However, having said that, this is a very new trauma, and it touched everyone. It did not skip a household. I don't know anyone in this country that doesn't know someone that doesn't, that is not related to a traumatic event in some way. Because if you didn't have rockets fall being shot at you, then or directed at you, then you've been to the scene in the party. If you haven't been to the party in the Nova party, then you know someone that was killed in the Nova party and they live next door to you. Like it affected everyone. You need to remember we also have, the North border that is in danger right now. So people have been evacuated from the north, people have been evacuated from the south. There's so much going on that really we're trying to get people moving from acute stress reactions to reduce the symptoms, get them to feel self-efficacy and confident enough to move towards healing as fast as possible with the conditions that we have that are not great because the war is ongoing.
Wow, it's a big job to reach
a little bit, yeah.
everyone in Israel. And I think we're all feeling like we need it here too. So moving on to the next topic, the trauma therapy is one side of things you're doing. The other side is fighting the anti-Semitism that is just out of control. Last week, you were in Brussels at a Jewish community security conference. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the conference was interesting because it was set up about 6 months ago. And then when we were supposed to go, we were thinking, well, should we go to Brussels or not? We're in the middle of a war here. And then they talked to us and said, you know what? It's even more important now. Okay. So it was under an organization that is called EU Care. And what they do is they teach community security in Europe and Jewish communities in Europe. And they do a really good job. The problem that they're seeing right now, first is the rise of anti-Semitism, right? And incidents that, I think they have a rise of hundreds of percentage in incidents that they're seeing. And the magnitude of it, I mean, it's more violent and it's horrifying on one hand. The other hand, they're saying, even if I have the community security, let's say I can secure the premises of a school, right? Or let's say I can secure my community, people are scared. And the stress level is very high. What do I do with that? And those are the questions that we are able to help with, and talking about community resiliency and community and personal resiliency, how to develop that and how to help people to get the community stress level down in order for them to be able to go through these times without it breaking the community itself. And that's a challenge. It's a real challenge. We see it in the US, we see it in Europe. I know that I'm seeing it also in Australia. I can tell you that the Ministry of Diaspora right now has an effort to create something. I'm supposed to be there, I think, in December, somewhere in Germany, another conference for communities, for Jewish communities across Europe, because they're saying we need help and we need it now. We need to know what to do with our people, how to talk to them, how to shift the way we do things, because whatever it is that we're doing right now is not really working. People are terrified.
They are. I mean, that was my next question, is how do people cope with feeling unsafe in their communities? Because a lot of people are feeling like they don't want to go out to, Jewish community places or to show Jewish identity.
I think it's a process. You have to kind of assess where you're at first, and every community is different. But the bottom line is what you want to do is you cannot change the conditions that you're in right now. You can do that while, talking to the politicians and trying to create pressure in order for things to calm down, and also for people to be held accountable for the things that they do, right? So that's one area that needs to be pushed. And the second one is security. Like, you have to go and talk about physical security of your population. Okay, but what do you do with the fact that your kid doesn't want to go to school? What do you do with the fact that when you're home, you're scared? So when you're dealing with that, there's a way to, to look at components of community resiliency and start working at it. Now, the best way is to work at it ahead of time, right? You don't want to work and be prepared for a crisis during a crisis, but we're already in it. And the idea is to give really a few tools of how to talk. I mean, it's not being optimistic, but I think it's being assertive enough and connected to the meaning of your existence as a Jewish community to be able to speak in a different language. And I think it starts with the leadership of every community, and it goes throughout all the anchors in the community, which is the schools, the JCCs, synagogues, whatever anchors you have in your community. Sometimes it's the it's the educational system, but sometimes it's all the activities that happen after, right? It's the I forgot the name for it, but when you look at it, then you have to target all these things, and you need to start giving people that are in key positions really some practical tools. So for example, you switch from emotions to cognitive. That's like one rule, a guideline that we teach all the time. You go from the limbic system to the cognitive area of your brain, which means every time I say that I'm scared, I'm going to ask you really the questions of what are you scared of, and I'm going to switch you to thinking rather than sitting in your emotions. Not because I don't want to hear how you're doing, because right now when the stress is high, we want to move into cognitive, because cognitive moves us into action, and action is better for us right now. Okay, so there are all these guidelines that we use in order to promote resiliency within the community. And the good news is stress is contagious, but also resilience. So if you do it right, you'll see circles of resiliency in your community rather than circles of strength, of stress.
Right. Well, Mickey from Victoria had asked the question of how do you get out of this feeling of despair? And then we had another question from Laurie in New South Wales. She said, how does one not lose hope? So these are some of the questions, more of the negative feelings. How do we get through this? And another question was, how do we forgive and move on from what has happened? So these are all, emotions that a lot of people are feeling. So anger, and yeah. So how do we move on from this?
I'll break it down the way I see it. Okay. So first, this is not a good time to forgive and forget. I'm sorry. It's not a good time to forgive and forget, and we're not moving on yet. I mean, we're not there yet. So that's one. So if you want to move on, I would tell you don't. The situation is still happening. We're not there yet. We're not moving on from anything. It's still happening. It's still in the making. So that's one. If you want to have good impact on history and on, the history of the Jewish people, this is not a good time to say, okay, I forgive and forget. That's one. The second thing is allow the range of emotion to happen. If you're not going to be despaired now, when are you going to be? If you're not going to be angry now, when? What else needs to happen in order for people to feel anger? I'm sorry. I know it's not accustomed to say, that anger is an acceptable emotion. If it fits the bill, it fits the bill. Right now, being angry makes a whole lot of sense. It's okay to be angry. It's not okay to be violent. That's a different thing. What you do with your anger, right? We tell it to kids all the time. You can be angry. What you do with it is a different story. So you don't show it in your behaviors. You're not going to go to violence, but be angry, which means every statement that you make is going to have a lot of energy behind it. And people are going to understand that we mean business this time. We're not just going to sit there polite and accept the verdict of the whole world going crazy, of everything being upside down and inside out, because that's the reality that we're seeing. There was a crazy massacre in Israel on October 7th, and everyone is looking at us as if we're to blame. I'm sorry, in my world, not okay. So yes, I'm going to be with a lot of energy, and I'm going to speak with conviction, and I'm going to go and I'm going to do whatever is necessary in order to not fold. People expect the Jewish nation to be polite because we are. We're very polite, we're very accepting, we're very diverse. There's something about the Jewish nation that comes across like that because this is who we are. But there's got to be a line. And the line is massacres that look really familiar from 75 years ago. It looks almost exactly the same, if not worse. And maybe this is the time to say, if you're despaired, now I'm going to go for the emotions. So first, anger, as far as I'm concerned, use it. That's one. The second thing is when you feel despair, okay, because that's a harder one to deal with, sit with it for a second. Sit with it and ask yourself, what are you despaired about? Means that's another tool, right? A practical tool for things like that is to be accurate. And I'm always going to give an example of a kid, because I think when we talk about kids, it's easier for people to understand. So when a kid says, I feel, I'm very worried, and I think nothing is going to get better. It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And then I'm going to ask him, what does that mean? Where does the fear really sit? What does that mean it's going to get worse? Okay. Talk it out. Let people actually say the words, because usually what happens is the minute you move from just saying, I'm feeling despaired, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling something, and you start speaking it, you're actually giving it full sentences of what it is and the context of things, you start realizing that it's not as big as you think. Because the world is not just going to start killing Jews, because it's not going to happen. Because the reality that we live in right now is that Israel exists. Okay? What happened to us in the Holocaust is not going to happen again in the same magnitude, because it's not going to happen. Back then, we didn't have the ability to speak up. Now we do. Back then, we didn't have the ability to do blah, 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 and now we do. I mean, the minute you break it down into what does despair look like, and why am I sad? I'm saying sit with it for 5 minutes and then move on into what is it exactly? What are you sad about? And what do you want to do about it? I have a lot of clients that talk to me and say that they're really sad. Well, I'm sad too. It's heartbreaking. Every story that you hear is heartbreaking. Okay? You can't run away from it. The only way out is in. Sit with it for 5 minutes. Feel it. And then tell yourself, okay, I'm feeling sad. Now what? It's okay to be sad. Now what? What am I going to do with the sadness is what counts. What am I going to do with the despair is what counts. And everything, in my mind, everything is connected to a meaning. And the meaning is that we are okay. It's okay that we exist. As far as I'm concerned, the Jewish nation, you know what? It's okay that we actually are here to stay. That's my meaning. And my meaning is that we fight for love. We don't fight for hate. The Jewish nation and the Israeli army always fights because they love. They don't fight because they hate. We love our people, so we protect them. We don't fight for hate. And when you have a meaning like that, it's something that everybody can relate to. We're not fighting because we hate the Palestinians. We're fighting because we love our people and we have to protect them. Find the meaning that works for you, and it will give you the strength to wake up in the morning. I'm telling you, from a very personal point of view, I live in a freaking war zone. I drive to Sderot every day. There are rockets every day. There are direct hits every day. We have soldiers that die every day. I know at least 10 people that died on October 7th. Okay, this is not easy for any of us. But there's a meaning in what we do. The murder and the massacre was meaningless. And you can be very angry about why it happened and you can go into it, but I'd rather not. Right now, in order to stay focused, in order to stay out of the sadness and not just sink into it, I give it space and then I move on. And I move on to what can I do about it? Where is my voice? And I found different things for me. So the work is one thing, but also I opened up a social media account and I just go for it because I feel like this is my way to impact, you know?
And you are. There's quite a few.
Right.
If anybody wants to search you up afterwards, you've got some great YouTube videos there showing everybody what it's like where you are. So I've got a question here from Mia from Queensland. She wants to know, how do you deal with anti-Semitism in your career? I'm a social media manager and have come across the most awful threats, hate, and have lost clients because of it. It's disheartening and it makes me feel very unsafe, but there seems no clear path through it or a way to avoid it. Yeah.
I say, and I'm sorry, and I know I'm a little different with my reactions. The more the merrier, which means if you get all these reactions from people, it means you're hitting it on the head. You're getting to them. Because otherwise they would just, not even bother to respond. So if you're saying something and people are reacting, give it a different meaning. Give it a different meaning. And the meaning is, oh, you're doing something right. So do more, not less. More, not less. And again, they expect us to fold. They expect us to be what we've been doing until now, kind of dealing with it, and letting things in and say, I'm not going to worry about this. I'm not going to bother. I'm going to be the bigger person. This is not the time to say, forget, be the bigger person. It's not the time. This is the time to fight back. And if you're going to fight back, social media is the platform these days. Unfortunately, that's the platform. You have a bunch of idiots, I'm sorry, very, very left wing that side with Hamas. We have a lot of people that are not informed, that really don't know the first thing about Israel, history, or anything. And this is a good time to fight them and meet them where they're at. And I'm not calling for violence. I'm not saying that you have to be rude or aggressive online, but you have to be assertive. And you have to make sure that you have the point across. Now, if you're not feeling safe, you have to look at it from a few angles. One, physically, are you safe? Okay, physically, are you safe? So you wanna make sure that physically you're making sure that You are safe. The other part of it, if you're scared, that's okay. And again, it's the feeling thing. If you're scared, look at it and say, what am I worried about? Am I worried that somebody that said something to me online is actually going to target me? Because if I am, there's something to do about it. Be very accurate about what it is and then do something about it. Don't stay without action. The more you're going to bombard the police and your parliament, representative, the more they're going to do something about it. Don't let someone threat you online and then say, you know what, how they're going to find them. No, go file a complaint, be active, make sure that they understand that we mean business this time. Enough is enough. Seriously. I mean, the way I see it, enough is enough. We have been really the good guys. Everybody's talking to me about the hospital bombing and whatever. We had 3 bombings on the hospital here in Ashkelon. 3 bombs that hit the hospital here. One of them hit the NUCI. The NICU, I think NICU. Did you hear about it on the news?
No.
Did anybody say anything? No. So the way I see it, I'm sorry. War is ugly. War is very ugly. And things happen in war that we wish that it would never happen, but we didn't ask for it. We didn't call for it. And we definitely don't have tunnels underneath our hospitals bombing kids. Just don't. So I am done being on the defense. I think that's my biggest advice. Stop being on the defense and go be on the offense. When somebody says something, I would ask them, and I do that all the time. I always give them the ball back and tell them, why are you not fighting for me? The question is not why I'm fighting for Israel. The question is, why are you not joining? That's the question. Why are you not siding with the people that say that, a lot of women have been raped, a lot of teenage girls and young people that have been raped? Why are you not siding with me, Angelina Jolie, for example? Why are you not speaking for the hostages? If you're for human rights, why are you not speaking for me? The question goes back to you. You need to justify yourself. I'm done justifying myself. And I think that's the shift of the mindset that we need to have across the world. And we are a force to be reckoned with.
Absolutely. So Sandra from New South Wales asked, how do the families of the hostages sit with the uncertainty of the hostages' fate?
This is the hardest part, I think. This is the hardest part because they're in limbo. Being in limbo is one of the worst things that can happen to you when it comes to people's lives, all right, and your loved ones. They're sitting in between not knowing what's going on with their loved ones to not knowing if they're going to have the hostages back. First, if my loved one is going to be one of them, right? Second, what condition they're going to be in, psychologically and physically, right? There's so much going on with the hostages situation. I think we've never dealt with a situation like this in Israel. It's very complex. Another piece of it is going to be the guilt. It's going to be a big piece of guilt in this thing, unfortunately, because if I'm going to have my kid back and they're going to say, okay, an 8-year-old can come back, but an 18-year-old will not. Or when they're saying right now, they're talking about getting the hostages back and they're saying, we're only going to get some of them back, so the mothers and the kids. Well, what happens to an 18-and-a-half-year-old soldier? Does he not count, right? Do we know? It's very difficult. Okay? It's very difficult. It's a very complex situation. I think sitting in uncertainty is the worst part. The best advice that we give them is first to be able to sit in their feelings, and second is to be active, constantly active. That's why you see them on the streets and you see them putting posters up and you see them putting t-shirts out and whatever that is that they can do right now to stay active is to keep them sane. Because the worst enemy of trauma is helplessness. If you feel helpless, you have a better chance of developing PTSD. If you're outside of the helpless mode to an extent, you have a better chance of surviving this, right?
Well, that leads into the next question. We have Rachel in Victoria. She said, how do you build resilience knowing that things will get worse before they get better? So I think it probably is similar to what you've just said.
Right. Well, you have to put your eye on the ball. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. One of the things that we teach, when we teach resiliency and mental health intervention is we teach the planning piece. in order for us to be able to go through a tough situation, you have to have a planning period. So I'll give you an example from what we do with our, not the firefighters, I'm sorry, from our pilots, from the Army. So the way they train them, one of the training tools is self-inoculation, which means they talk about the fear. And what do you do with the fear factor, knowing that you're going to go into a mission that is going to be very difficult? So the way they do it with them is they say, okay, let's say the mission right now is to go and bomb in Syria, okay? And the conditions are very difficult and blah, blah, blah. What they do is they break down the mission, knowing exactly where the worst periods of that mission are going to be, because you can predict that. And then they're going to tell them, okay, let's say this scenario is going to happen and the worst of the worst is going to come. What are you going to do about it? What is your plan? You can do this, 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 and that, right? Once you have a plan and you start saying it, not just thinking it, saying it, you have a better ability really to go through something, to come out the other side of it. Another example for it is what we dealt with in COVID. So I don't know if you guys remember, but the first shot that would tell you, you're going to get the shot and you're going to feel, some people are going to feel really, really sick. You're going to be feeling really sick for 2 days. You don't have COVID. It just means that's the shot. And then you're going to come out the other side of it, right? Well, I went and I got the shot and I was so sick for a couple of days, but I knew they prepared me for it, right? That it's going to get better. It's going to be okay. So as far as I'm concerned, I was able to sit in it. I was able to sit with all the symptoms, knowing that I'm going to come out the other side. So it's a matter of perspective. It's a matter of how you're going to reframe it. And what is your plan? Because I bet you anyone that says, I know it's going to get better, but right now it's going to be really, really bad. I want you to tell me, how does bad look like? And when bad really gets worse, what are you going to do about it? And we do it here all the time. I have kids here that tell me, I know this is not the last siren. I'm scared of the sirens. I'm scared of the rockets. I don't know what to do. It's going to get worse. And I'm asking them, when the siren comes, what do you do? The worst of the worst of your nightmare is going to happen. What are you going to do? Well, I'm going to run to the bomb shelter. Okay. And then what? I'm going to close the windows and the doors. Okay. And then what? I'll talk to my parents. Okay. And then what? Right? Because what happens is the minute they hear themselves say, they actually know what they're doing. They know how to go through it and they're going to come out the other side. Believe it or not, it helps them when the siren actually comes, because it does. And they're like, oh, okay, I already know. I already created that plan in my head and the expectation is there. So that's another tool that we teach. And again, I'm going through it really, really fast, but we teach it, we practice it, and then people know how to come out the other side. And this is another way that we teach parents how to talk to their kids, because I think these are very challenging times for parents as well. So.
Right. And with regards to the evacuees, David in New South Wales asked, what happens now with the residents that, what needs to happen for them before they feel safe enough to move back to Sderot and all the other communities?
That is such a good question. So I have to tell you, this is the question that the mayor really is that's the one big question the mayor has spinning in his head, right? And he's been talking to all these experts about it. And here's what we realize. First, now we know that people are not going to come back until December. So probably until the end of December, they're still going to be outside of Sderot. That's one. The second thing is, which means we have a little bit of time to prep. The idea is, one, we need to make sure that Hamas is no longer in control of Gaza. So that has to happen, and the border needs to be secured. So physical, safety and security is one. The second thing is, we're working right now towards figuring out all these technological solutions for people to be able to feel safe and to connect to any kind of physical, safety need, if they have it, if they should have it when they come back. So I'm working with the Resilience Hub. It's like a tech startup initiative that we have in Sderot. And we're working on thinking about solutions, technical solutions for the area, the whole area, the Gaza envelope and the northern Negev as a whole. And so that's the second step. The other thing is, we understand that we need to give people some anchor, from within, in order to be able to come back. Is it going to be easy? No, because we're used to rockets. We're not used to telling kids, okay, now you can go to the park. And I don't know, the threat now is not the threat of a rocket, because if there's a rocket, my kid can go to the bomb shelter. Threat is very different right now. It's a physical threat of someone with a gun being there. This is going to take time, but we are working on it. And this is the work that they do right now in the resilience centers all across the country.
Incredible. And the animals from the resilience center, how are they doing?
Wow, good question. So it was interesting because somebody had to feed them at the beginning of this, and you couldn't get close, you couldn't get through. Just for people that know Sderot, so the police station itself is situated really next to the resilience center, and on the other side of it, there's the Sderot Museum, the founder's house. My office is there, and in the back, really is the animal center, animal therapy center. So everything happened in the same area. I'm sorry to be gruesome, but we had bodies all over the place. Okay, it was really hard, and it was the heart of the fighting. So there was no way to get close to the animal the first 30 hours, really. Afterwards, we had volunteers that went and fed the animals and took care of them. I mean, people had to go there heavily armed, with helmets and a vest to go and feed the animals. I mean, it's a surreal sight if you've ever seen one, The animals that we were able to take out, we did in order for them to be treated somewhere else. And some of the animals had to stay because there was nowhere for them to go. The person that was in charge of the animal therapy center was she was kind of kidnapped. I mean, she was a part. She lives in one of the kibbutzim, so her situation was very different, and she did not go back to work. So now we have someone else that is dealing with the situation. It was not good. We were impacted, from all angles. I think she rarely was caught and released, and I don't know exactly what the situation was for her, but she was heavily traumatized. So we needed to find someone else to do the work over there. The animals are being treated, and maybe you'll be happy to hear that we have a plan right now to expand the animal therapy grounds and to create another center just for that, because we see that it does the work, and work with groups, we'll be able to get to more people in a shorter amount of time. So that's going to happen too.
And are there animal assisted therapy centers across Israel, or is it mainly in your region?
So I know that there are a few. I'm not so sure how many are there in the region itself. This one was very famous because it's very good. I mean, it's very good. And you need to have your therapist trained, then they need to know resiliency, and they need to know animals, and it's a combination. And I know there are a few across the country, but right now, anyone that is doing anything that has to do with therapy is full.
Sure.
Because it hit everyone. Some people from Ra'anana that usually don't have anything to do with the war in the South. Now maybe they know someone that was murdered in the party, or maybe some of their friends that live in one of the kibbutzim was murdered. So everyone is impacted right now. So really, finding therapists right now is the key, and qualified ones.
Well, what's interesting is Anne from WA, she asked, is there a role for overseas clinicians or, psychotherapists to help with trauma therapy over there, if you needed them to come over or via Zoom?
So I think it's a good question. I'll tell you what I see with it. One, there's the language barrier that we need to be mindful of, because a lot of people are not going to be able to have therapy in English unless they are English speakers, and you can find some of them. There are a lot of them in Ra'anana and Pasaba, in that area. So that's one. The second thing is you really got to be able to connect to the national trauma. You got to be able to work with it and understand what's happening on the ground. So that's the second thing. And the third thing, not everybody likes working via Zoom, and to do trauma work via Zoom is harder because sometimes the symptoms are very physical and they're apparent, and it's hard to work with it when you're away. However, having said that, I do believe that if you have people with this kind of expertise, you should start using them within your communities. Open up a hotline, set it up, start working with people within your community through Jewish Family Services, through the Jewish community, through the JCC, I don't know what, because the more proactive you're going to be, the better it's going to be in the end, as far as the end result. So if you have people that actually can help This is a good time to focus on your community and make sure that you're being proactive. Have groups, have meetings, create sessions, create something that promotes resiliency, gives hands-on practical tools, and then make sure that your community is already kind of coming out the other side of it instead of waiting for everybody to crash and then start working. So being proactive is super important.
That's right. And what about the IDF? Are there different therapists, or is your team involved with that as well, with what they're going through?
So the IDF has their own network and their own people, and what they did is they called into the reserves a lot of social workers that right now are working with the soldiers. Is it enough? I'm not so sure. I don't know. I can't tell you the numbers. Again, people are going to tell you yes, but then I hear stories, and I'm not so sure that that's the case. I can tell you that I worked with the police department because the ones that have been hit mainly is the police force. The police force was one of the forces that now people feel that they can count on, because what happened in Israel on October 7th is people felt like the army failed them and the government failed them. So there was a big breach of trust between the army and the people and between the government and the people. However, the police was one of the organizations that actually functioned in an amazing way. They were right there and people felt it. So there was no breach of trust. That's one, but a lot of them, there are a lot of casualties from the police force, and a lot of them have seen awful things. Like think about crime scene investigators from the police. These guys, all they've been doing since October 7th is identifying bodies, and some of them in horrible conditions. So I know the police department has a lot of therapists, and they have their own organizational professionals from their organization. However, they asked for volunteers, and we did provide volunteers and help. And right now I'm working with them to do some trainings. So we are working with the police, but not there yet.
And just a couple more questions before we go. Just with the whole anti-Semitism on campus, and for any students listening, what are you finding, just in your international role? How are you finding it, talking to different students? I know you said you were going to campuses as well. What's it like now?
So I think first it's not good. Let's put it this way. I mean, we're not going to sugarcoat it. It's not good. However, again, I think the rule is the same one. You want to make sure that you're a part of an organization. Do not stand alone. Even if the belief system is not exactly yours, like the organization is more religious and you're not so religious, this is a good time to stick together. Because the feeling of being together and belonging to something is actually one of the measurements of resiliency. So first, go and find yourself a group that you can be with. And you don't have to agree on everything right now. I mean, think about Israelis right now. We couldn't agree on the color of, the banana 6 months ago, 3 months ago, a month ago. We couldn't agree on anything. Right now, we have a common cause. Everyone is working together. Religious people, secular people, people from different, spectrum of the political arena. So we're all working together. So do that. First, don't stay alone. Be a part of a group. That's one. 2, push for training. Right now, I'm in the middle of, hopefully, I'll be able to go to the US soon and work with leaders and on campuses, okay, that have Jewish students that they work with. And the idea is for you to not just stay together, but actually have the right tools. Have the right tools and right practical measures, and not just the right protocols. What happens if? So work on the physical aspect on one hand and work on the mental health aspect of the same. Because first aid is first aid. Psychological first aid and first aid have to go hand in hand. Otherwise, you can save somebody's life and you can be physically okay, but mentally you can be falling apart, which means that we defeated the purpose. So ask for support. Get into an organization and push for the right kind of trainings. And I know that there are different trainings happening everywhere. That's 1. 2, speak up. Speak up. Make enough noise. Right now, the media, they love it. They want to hear all the juicy things. Give them juicy information. If you have a professor that is being anti-Semitic, shame him. I'm not saying it because I hate, I'm saying it because you need to be protected. And the way you phrase it to yourself and the way you phrase it to the world matters. We're not doing the shaming because we're bad people. We're doing it because a person like that is a dangerous human being and he should be out of work and he should be out of his position. And really define your role. And if your role is to protect the people on campus, Jewish students on campus, make sure you have enough ties to student council and ties to the professors, and make noise on the media, not just in your circle of social media, make actual noise. Because here's what happens. Once you touch their pocket and once you touch their position and their pension, they're thinking differently. Be on the offense. Stop sitting on the defense, I think.
That's good advice. And before we go, I wanted to ask you if you have any parting words for us, based on your experience just being out there, in Israel, out in the world. Have you got any message for our audience?
I do, I hope. These are difficult times. But they're not going to defeat us. We are going to be on the other side of it. Make no mistakes about it. If anybody has, I don't know, some days look worse than others, we're going to be on the other side of it. And if you want to be on the other side of it, you better be there with a good mental state. Okay? We need to be there from a place that we've done everything right. We stuck to our moral standards, but we spoke up. And I think it gives you a role, it gives you a meaning, and it gives you an identity, I guess, that maybe some people were shying away from it for a while. But the understanding of who you are, this is not a crisis of identity. If anything, this is a time to say, you know what? I know what my identity is, and I'm not going to apologize for it. And I'm going to be an Am Yisrael Chai. It's not just a phrase. Am Yisrael Chai, deal with it. That's my message to the international platform that thinks that maybe we should reconsider. We're not reconsidering. We're here to stay.
Exactly. Thank you. And so I wanted to say thank you so much for your time this evening, and thank you for everything you're doing to help so many Israelis through this very dark period. Thank you also for all you're doing to build the resilience of the Jewish people around the world and speaking up for all of us. You are a true leader of our time. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. And before we say goodnight, we pray for the safe return of all the hostages, the safety of our IDF, the safety of everyone living in Israel and Jewish people around the world. Together we will get through this, as you said, and Am Yisrael Chai. Good night and thank you.
Thank you. Toda.
Toda. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us.